Okay, welcome everybody. It's 12 o'clock, so we'll kick off. So welcome to the latest in the Developments in Safeguarding Masterclass. This time we've got the really interesting subject of talking about Gypsies, Roma and Travellers in North Yorkshire. And with us today we have Nikki Lamb and Andy Kirk, who are very experienced in this area. So welcome and thank you for doing this presentation for us. Just a couple of housekeeping things just to kick things off. So first of all, just to be aware of your environmental noise. Obviously you've automatically been muted coming in here, but if you do unmute yourself, if you could just make sure that there's no ongoing confidential conversations or anything in the background, so please mute your microphones if necessary. This session is being recorded. We will be trimming off people's faces, so you won't be seen in this, apart from yourself, Nikki, obviously, because you've got a video that you're going to be showing us later on. And if you have any questions, if you'd like to just add them into the chat, and depend upon the type of question, we'll either save it for the end or I'll raise it as we're going through, if that's okay. Just as we always get these queries, so just to make sure everybody's aware, all of our masterclasses are recorded and all of the slides are available on our website at the address on the screen there, and you can also go onto our YouTube channel and you can watch the old videos from there as well. So any previous masterclasses that we've had in the last, say, 18 months are all on there, so please feel free to go and look at those. Also, it's really helpful, the standard YouTuber sort of thing as well, is if you can give it a like and if you can subscribe to us as well, because we need to get over a certain amount of people subscribed so we can name our channel, because at the moment trying to say UCU, EU, PDN and all of that as a web address is not very helpful for anybody. So we do want to try and get Nyscp as soon as we can. So if you can like and subscribe, that would be really helpful. Okay, so I'm going to hand over now to Nikki Lamb, who's the site manager for Horton Housing Association. Welcome, Nikki.
Well, thanks, Hayden. So if we can move on to the first slide. Thank you. Yes, so as Hayden just mentioned, I'm Nikki Lamb and I work for Horton Housing Association. So I'm going to give a bit of an introduction around Horton Housing Association and our background for those who perhaps haven't heard of us or are not aware of our existence in North Yorkshire. Then I'm going to go on to look at Gateway Site Management, which is the site provision for Gypsy and Travellers that I manage. Then we're going to look at some myth-busting stuff and then move on to lifestyles, including the different lifestyles that the culture have. And next slide, please. Thank you. So then we're going to go on to look at discrimination and ethnicity, and then the impact and there's going to be a short film there as well that you can watch some of our tenants giving a little brief talk on their experiences, and at the end there's going to be some time hopefully for questions that again hopefully I'll be able to answer. So if we start with the introduction, next slide please. So Horton Housing Association. So not surprisingly, it's sometimes mistaken as a general let housing association, obviously due to the name with the stock of rental properties. However, it's a charity organisation that works with the aims to meet the need of housing and support needs of some of the most socially excluded and vulnerable people in our community. And so our mission is to promote social justice, equal access and our services are designed to deliver self-esteem, respect and independence to people who are disadvantaged by housing and social circumstances, discrimination, financial exclusion and other forms of social need. And a key focus for the organisation is to work in partnership at both service delivery with our clients and also on a strategic level, with the aim of improving and developing streamlined preventative services. Next slide. So our background, so what our service delivery includes is community support services, supported housing, floating support, homeless street outreach and intensively managed housing and site management. And these services are delivered to a variety of client groups. Some are homeless, have mental health problems, teenage parents, refugees, drug and alcohol misuse, complex needs, offenders, and we work across West and North Yorkshire. Next slide. So Gateway Site Management, so what do we do? So Gateway Site Management, we are long stay residential sites for Gypsy and travellers who are in need of culturally appropriate housing. And so the sites are owned by North Yorkshire County Council and managed by Horton Housing. And the scheme comprises 4 caravan sites across North Yorkshire, and there's 2 in Selby and 2 in Hambleton district. So the scheme houses 56 families and they all have a slab or a concrete pitch, as we would call it, an exclusive use of a shed or a utility block, and that comprises of kitchen and a bathroom stroke utility room. The tenants own their own trailers, such as touring caravans, and a small number do rent static caravans, those with bigger families who need the more space. And that leads to dual rent payments, so it's not a cheap way of life, as is often thought. Next slide. So there's some photographs from one of our sites, which shows sort of a typical slab, if you like, concrete pitch, and a utility block. So there's one of those on each pitch, and you can see in the end photo there one that's caravans are on there. Next slide. Thank you. And so this is a typical bathroom. So each pitch has its own access to this, and you know, as you can see, they've got a bath, a shower, obviously a toilet and basin, and within that room there's also space for a washing machine and a tumble dryer. Can we have the next slide, please? And so this is a typical kitchen. As you can see, they've got a fitted kitchen with the space for a fridge, freezer, a cooker. So we don't supply the white goods. However, we can support them to get a grant through the NYLAF, where they can get the white goods if so needed. Next slide, please. Support. So Gateway Site Management are now standalone and made up of 5 staff, so including one manager, which is myself, and there's 2 part-time housing officers who are locally based. So I have one that's based in Hambleton and one that's based in the Selby district, and 2 maintenance staff, again locally based. So we provide fair access to housing through our allocations policy. So we have a fair allocation policy where, you know, we can't sort of cherry pick who we get. We've got to be, it's got to be fair access. We provide help with benefits, including housing costs, so housing benefit claims, council tax rebates, and any personal allowance benefits, disability allowances, and so on. reading and understanding letters. Due to the literacy issues that some of the tenants have, they may bring letters to us and ask us to read that letter, and sometimes they can barely read it, but they just don't understand really what the letter's about. And so, you know, it can be not just about reading it, it can be about helping them to understand what that letter says. Intensive management of sites and the units. So it's not like a general let, in terms of we have regular inspections, weekly inspections of the sites and the units. We carry out sort of fire risk assessments every week, such as testing the smoke alarms and so on, picking up on repairs. And so some of the tenants don't report the repairs, so as part of that inspection we'll check for repairs. So we provide a repairs service where we aim to get the repairs done in a timely manner, and help with dealing with arrears and debts. And so when people can fall into arrears on the rents, often due to the delay with the universal credits and things like that, we can support them in doing a payment budget plan, and help them hopefully to get, you know, to catch up on their arrears and to make payment plans to get out of debt. Next slide, please. So we try to keep them safe and secure on the sites by dealing with antisocial behaviour. We aim to help them to access services. So if someone's been living roadside for many years, or just various staying places, then if we know fixed address, they've often not been able to register with the GP or get the children into schools. And so one of the things that we do as soon as they move onto site is to get them registered with the GP and help to get the children into school. So getting help from other agencies to provide specialist support, for example, health, mental health services, dental services, and we also provide emotional support during stressful times. Next slide, please. So our experience. So in 2009, we took on the challenge, and it was a challenge, of working with Gypsy and Travellers in the capacity of site management. And we quite quickly became aware that Gypsy and Travellers are one of the most marginalised groups in today's society. They suffer discrimination on a daily basis that, should it be directed at any other minority group, it won't be tolerated, and it would be a criminal offence. These challenges can become intolerable to the point of complete exclusion and disengagement from the settled community. Next slide, please. And in our experience of working with Gypsy and Travellers, we've been aware of verbal abuse from passers-by, point blank refusal of delivery of goods to a site address, blatant refusal of entry to social venues such as pubs, restaurants, shops and even holiday sites. I've known withdrawals of a job offer once ethnicity is discovered, and also weddings cancelled, sometimes at the very last minute, by the venue, when the venue becomes aware that it's a Gypsy wedding. Next slide, please. Myth busting. So what are some of the common myths about the Gypsy and Traveller community? So Hayden, are you able to bring up the myth busting sheet, please? So if I could just give you a couple of minutes just to sort of have a look at some of the myths and the opposing facts on the sheet. You've probably heard of a lot of the myths, but maybe not know the fact that runs alongside that. So if I could just give you a minute so just to have a look through that.
I think we've got some people saying that the sheet's too small. However, I have put a link for this document in the chat, so you can actually view it straight from your own machine if you want to try on that link. That might help
Ooh,
some.
that's nice. That's nice and big now. It's a bit difficult, Hayden, knowing when to scroll, I guess.
As I said, the fact sheet's available. If you just click on the link in the chat, you can download this and you can obviously keep it. We will be linking it up with the presentation on our website as soon as we've uploaded this. We're planning on this presentation being available later this afternoon.
Brilliant. So we'll move on, and people can, if they haven't had a chance to see that, then as you say, they can look at it after the presentation. So as you can see, if you did see, many of the myths are oversimplified generalisations with negative connotations. So Gypsy and Travellers are modern people, and they're often well integrated into the communities, you know, where they pass through or where they permanently live. Most people walk past Gypsy and Travellers every day without knowing, but the media, however, they continue to spread the myth that Gypsy and Travellers are strange, exotic and deviant characters that blight British society. And there's a kind of a culture of to put, you know, like poke them and see if they're real, kind of a culture, like a curiosity around them, like yeah, it's quite quirky. People think they are quite mystical and yeah, a lot of curiosity about them. For those that don't, you know, sort of are not aware of the culture. So next slide, please. Yeah, so myth busting. So there's lots of traditions, and there's a list below that I'm not going to go through at this stage, but just lots of traditions, and they're often misportrayed. And I think sort of programs like Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, you know, kind of portrays some of these things, and it's not always helpful. And creates more myths sometimes. So yeah, but we'll move on and look at it in more detail. So lifestyle. So I've put family first because family are the single most important thing to Gypsy and Travellers. They often have caring responsibilities for the older relatives in the family or children with disabilities. They don't tend to rely on external agencies to bring support in. They tend to do it amongst themselves. Deaths. So a death is obviously quite a traumatic, and it's a big event within the Gypsy and Traveller community where everybody will up sticks and go to the place where this person's died. That the settled community wouldn't necessarily do. I'm talking about aunties and uncles and cousins, you know, that they'll just up sticks and go. Yeah, providing care at home. So it's very rare that an elderly person would be put into a care home. They would tend to care for them at home. They're a very close-knit community, and they maintain them family links despite sometimes, you know, distance, geographical distance between them. They do maintain those family links, but wherever possible, they do tend to live in family groups. They do prefer to live in family groups. We have the next slide. Education. So, inequalities. Gypsy, Traveller and Roma pupils experiencing education. That includes poor attainment, high dropout rates, cuts to traveller education services, which I used to work with and they were great, placements when travelling, and the lack of GRT culture, heritage and language in schools and in the curriculum. So most children attend primary school, however it's inconsistent due to travelling to different areas, and so they tend to go back to square one each time they join a new school. So we know the consequences of the education not being accessed fully. And it's that the travellers have the highest proportion of any ethnic group with no qualifications and some of the lowest rates of economic activity. However, literacy, it's not considered a primary requirement, and educational attainment is not recognised as needed in the lifestyle. So home tutored and stereotypical roles take priority, and to go to school is considered gorgification in secondary school. So gorgification, for those who don't know, Gypsy and travellers will call the settled community or non-travellers gorgers. And so to go to secondary school, it would be considered like a gorger thing for them to do. So moving on, please. So education trades. So traditional trades include landscape gardening, collecting scrap metal, roofing, tarmacking, groundswork, patios, drives and paths, hawking their wares, which is now illegal, unfortunately, for them, such as pegs, sword items, gems, fortunes, and veg picking, which many of them did back in the day, picking veg for themselves and for farmers. And so if we could go to the next slide, please. So a big part of the lifestyle is horses. It's a large part of the culture, and trading them makes some travellers a living. So this can be difficult to maintain though in modern day living, because you know, the horse is no longer the means of travel, but it's an additional item, to an additional responsibility, if you like, to take when they're getting moved on from place to place. You know, it's the horse boxes and so on, then to cart with them. So horse trading, so they all like to attend the horse fairs, such as Appleby and Seamer. I'm sure you've heard of them. And some still travel traditionally in a boat or portavado, which is the old living wagons, and they still travel pulled by horses.
We just seem to have lost Nikki for a second. Hopefully she'll be back any moment. Hello, Nikki, are you there? Hi, Nikki. I think you're
Am I back in the room?
I think you're back in the room now. Welcome
Can you
back.
hear me?
Yes, can hear you now. Thank you.
I'm back in the room. Thank you. Where did we get to? Did we complete this slide? So can we have the next slide, please?
Hello, Nikki, are you there?
Hello, yes, am I there?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yep.
The wonders of a technology.
So,
I'm sorry about that. So there's just a request for somebody. Nikki Watkinson's asking for some with engaging with the young people, but we'll pass those details on to you. I'll go on to the next slide.
Thank you. So, crime. So yeah, as in any other community, there'll always be a percentage of those that will be involved in crime in the traveller community. But surprisingly, there is an underrepresentation of Gypsy and travellers in prisons. And usually it's minor offences, driving offences, repeated driving offences, coursing, lamping, hawking, theft and fraud is an example of some of the crimes. So not always, you know, the horrific things that you see on the television. Next slide, please. So there's the strong cultural traditions that are passed down the generations, and these include kind of recipes. So Gypsy and travellers traditionally cook on one-pot meals due to cooking over a pot over the open fire, and so they tend to, even these days, stick to one-pot meals such as stews and broths, ribs and cabbage, which is just an example. Sewing, so traditionally they make their own clothes, and particularly children's clothing. And pegs, yeah, so it is true, they do make their own pegs and tend to sell them at fairs and wherever they can, basically. So artwork, storytelling, and sometimes fortune telling. Next slide, please. So, ethnicity definition. So in 1998, the Human Rights Act identified that Gypsy and travellers, they defined them as an ethnic minority against whom discrimination is unlawful. So I'm not going to read all this through. It is there, going to be there for you to read sort of after the presentation. But it does explain a little bit about how Gypsy and travellers are now recognised as a minority group. But I will point out the public sector equality duty came into force on 5th of April 2011, which made an amendment to the 2011 Mobile Homes Act, which were about security of tenure. So what they wanted to do was to make the tenure of a Gypsy and traveller as secure as the settled community. And so they removed the licence agreements that were just a week-to-week agreement, and they could be kind of thrown off at any time, to be a more secure occupancy agreement, which is called a written statement. So the race relations do recognise English, Welsh and Scottish, Roman and Gypsies and Irish travellers as distinct ethnic minority groups in the UK. This, however, does not include New Age travellers or show people. So, as such, Gypsy and travellers have the same rights to race relations protection as other recognised ethnic minority groups. Ethnic status is not dependent on mobility, and therefore the blanket term traveller, it's not always useful, because they may be living in bricks and mortar. You know, they may not be mobile anymore, but they've still got that ethnicity, so they are still a Gypsy and traveller. If we could have the next slide. So what discrimination do they get from the settled community? Well, other than what I've already pointed out previously, sort of the name calling and the general just bullying. Oh, sorry, I've moved on to other. Oh no, sorry. This is a little bit more about the ethnicity. So my apologies for that. I was jumping screens. So yeah, a little bit more about ethnicity, which again you can read at the end. But just an interesting fact that to point out is that people who live in caravans for work, so they may class themselves as a Gypsy or traveller, so they can adopt the label should they so wish. However, in this situation, it would be a small G and T on the Gypsy and traveller, so they wouldn't have capital letters. and that's because it's a chosen lifestyle and not an ethnicity. Next slide, please. Here we are. So yeah, discrimination. What discrimination do they get from the settled community? So again, like I said, you know, name calling in the streets. But also what they have is when it comes to planning permission and consultation for planning, there's a number of NIMBYs that will turn up to these consultations. So NIMBYs, if you haven't heard the term before, means not in my backyard. And so what you'll get is the settled community who'll say, you know, they'll turn up to these public meetings and oppose any application for a site or a small holding. And yeah, not in my backyard, people. Gypsy and Travellers in bricks and mortar. So as I said before, you know, some Gypsy and Travellers do move into bricks and mortar, but however, they are very isolated and excluded. They're not always welcomed onto the street, if you like. And many that do go to bricks and mortar come back to sites eventually. They do come back round and say, I want to come back to site, because it's just their way of life, and they find that they don't fit in with the general community. Yeah, and an example of discrimination I felt really strongly about, Appleby Fair. So this year the date changed so not to coincide with the Platinum Jubilee, and I quote, in order for the settled community to celebrate the Jubilee. This suggesting that the travelling community are not going to celebrate their Queen's Jubilee, which, you know, it's just not true. I mean, she's their Queen as well, and they're already trimming up with the little Union Jacks and things. And so I just felt that were really derogatory and exclusive. So my experiences. So in my experience, working with Gypsy and Travellers, I have always struggled to get contractors to come on the sites and do work. You know, they might put the phone down on me or just not turn up, or they might just blatantly say, we don't want the work, it's not worth it. Services, there's always a reluctance from services to come on the sites. Neighbours, we often get petitions going to get the site closed down. And personal, so on a personal level, I've been perceived as a Gypsy and Traveller myself, even though I'm not. You know, and I've been called a pikey. I've had abusive gestures, but I'm not one, right? So I can go home and I then become Nikki, the settled person from the settled community. So it don't follow me wherever I go. I can walk away from that. And, you know, when you experience that and you realise that some people can't walk away from that, you know, that's what they are and who they are, then it really gives you an insight into how their lives go, really, and how they must feel. Can we have the next slide, please? Agencies. So organisations and local councils also show a great reluctance to service this community. And it's been found difficult to get a response from the police, refuge collection, postal delivery, and I've experienced this quite often. Gypsy and Traveller children are taken out of mainstream education at an early age due to issues of bullying and discrimination within the school environment. Homelessness is an issue faced by many who are moved on from spare land, having to come to the next spare land they can find to having to source water, shower in local leisure centres to maintain their clean lifestyle, and unable to access healthcare and education, benefits, work, or provide for their children. And these issues that are faced are historical, and the implications of the oppression faced on a daily basis are apparent through the low self-esteem, poor physical and mental health, and low educational achievement. Next slide, please. So why is it important that we increase awareness of Gypsy and Traveller culture? Well, we need to destroy the myth and understand the barriers that they face. We need to learn to engage better, and we need to know how to better meet their support needs, understand their housing needs and their housing options, understand different cultures. We need to be encouraging positive declaration. So often what you'll get is, you know, they'll deny their ethnicity. And so in turn, the local authorities and equalities and diversity monitoring don't get a true reflection of Gypsy and Travellers presenting. And we need to improve access to services for Gypsy and Traveller community, and we can't do that without a positive declaration. So just a little something for you to think about yourself. Do you know how many Gypsy and Travellers access your services? So do you monitor that? Are you sure that everybody's declaring their ethnicity correctly and honestly? Something for you to think about. So can we have the next slide, please? Oh, so why don't Gypsies and Travellers disclose their ethnicity? So why do they pretend? Well, it's through fear, through racism, a lack of trust, poor access to services, and a history of negative association with authorities, for example, bailiffs, enforcement, police, education officers. So it's all to them, it's all authority to which they've had a bad experience. And so, yeah, lack of trust there, definitely. Can we have the next slide, please? So how do we create a climate for disclosure? So I think one of the things is about being culturally aware and culturally competent. And I have done some work with services to raise their awareness on and look at positive disclosure and so on. And I was once doing something with the police, and the sergeant turned around and said to me, "Why don't they live in houses?" And so I said to him, "Why don't you live in a caravan?" And so I kind of turned it on its head, and he went, "Oh, yeah, I didn't think of it that way." And so it's just about turning things on their head, really, and making people aware and competent to deal with the disclosure. It's about building that trust. And the way to do that is through familiarity and continuity, because it takes a long time for them to learn to trust people. And so if they're seeing a different person each time they access your service, you know, they're not gonna build that relationship or build that trust. So knowledge of specific housing options for the community, appreciation of literacy skills, so there's no point sending them a letter if they can't read it. So looking at alternative methods of communication that are available, and ask them how they describe their ethnicity. So I work with Gypsy and Travellers every day, but I always ask them how they describe their ethnicity, because they will all call themselves different. So they could say traveller, English traveller, Roman, you know. So there's so many cultures within cultures, if you like, under the umbrella. And so it's good to ask them how they describe their ethnicity, and then you know you're getting it right. Go to the next screen, please. So listen and respect. So hopefully, you know, staff be fully trained on equal opportunities and show commitment to equal opportunities, including Gypsy and Travellers within that. Don't interpret eagerness, enthusiasm as aggression. So such as crowding round, talking loudly, hand gestures. That's just the nature of you know, of the group. They're just, that's what they do. But it can be perceived as aggression, but it's actually not. It's just their way of communication sometimes. Provide alternative methods of communication and or support with paperwork. So if you are having to do paperwork and forms and things, then, you know, offer that support to sort of help them with that. And confidentiality is a big thing for them as well, which I suppose goes without saying. So can we go to the next slide? So we're now going to see watch a short film that some of the tenants on site have kindly taken part in, and just to tell you a little bit about their life experiences. And so if Hayden could start that film, please.
This is one of our sites located in North Yorkshire. We have 16 pitches on this site and 56 in total across 4 sites. So I'm stood on a slab today, which is a typical slab with a utility block behind me, which comprises a fitted kitchen, a bathroom, stroke utility room, where they can have a washer and a dryer and bath shower, etc, etc. And so the caravan will be located on here, stationed with a hookup facility there for their electric supply. Here at Site Management, we provide support with reading letters, getting grants, housing benefit or benefits claims, registering with GPs, and helping young parents get their children into school. So we offer various bits of support as we go along the way. We provide a repairs and maintenance service, so any repairs should be carried out in a reasonable time or in a timely manner. So one of the other things that we deal with on sites is obviously dealing with incidents, sharing any concerns that we may have, any safeguarding issues, domestic violence concerns, antisocial behaviour, and various other incidents that can arise on sites or anywhere else actually within the settled community. So yeah, we make a keen interest in trying to monitor any concerns and trying to work together with obviously other services and agencies who may be able to support the Gypsy and travellers with any issues that they might have. So we're now going to talk to a few of our tenants who may tell you more about the lifestyle that they lead and perhaps the backgrounds and their life here on the site.
It's a good lifestyle, and it's healthy, and you meet a lot of people, and most people are very nice. And you're travelling through a little village, and if you have an overnight stop, they'll ask you if you want water and things like that, which is nice, But you've got to be very careful. The roads are very, very busy. And your horses have got to be very fit, get them fit beforehand, 2 or 3 weeks before you be getting them yoked up and getting them hardened up a bit for the road, because there's no easy road to Appleby. Whichever way you go, there's no easy road. So if it takes us 10 days or something, you know what I mean? There's people travel from down the country, it might take them 3 weeks or something. But we're not in no race, so we just take our own pace. We'll have a couple of days here, a couple of days there, and it's relaxing really. It's the best part for me, travelling up. And I mean, years and years ago, you'd see a lot more wagons on the road when people were living in them all the time. We don't live in this all the time, it's just now and again when the weather's all right and if a fair comes up when we fancy going to a fair. And when you get onto the fair, as I say, it's very busy and there's a lot of dealing goes on, and people like horse dealing, which is a traditional thing for travel and gypsy people to do, and an horse might get sold over and over, maybe half a dozen owners over the week. People take a little bit of profit on it just to say that they've had a deal and things like that there. And there's a lot of stalls up there as well now, like a big market thing and that my wife and my girls and that like. And it's, as I say, it's good. And you meet up with all people from all over the country. People come to Appleby. It's the main thing for traveller and gypsy people. It's a good holiday. A lot of people like going abroad, which is lovely. I've never been abroad myself, but I like doing what we do.
I travelled around with horses and wagons, and life was hard. Getting water some places was easy, some places I couldn't hardly get drinking water. Getting bath was hard as well, but we had to get washed inside a wagon. Summertime was not too bad for doing hand washing outside, but inside in the winter time we had to do our best. We had to listen down the clothes because there wasn't nowhere to put them in the winter time and snow and heavy rain, heavy showers. We've been caught with downpouses while we're travelling with horses and wagons as well. So we've even travelled in the snow as well. Wow. With horses and wagons. And then we've had to, winter time we've had to carry hay up and down to feed the horses as well. And bags of corn. So it's been hard. So one day I decided I've had enough. I can't do it no more. I was becoming no well. Well, I'd actually found out I was no well down to my left-hand side. Down to brainwaves. Caused by an accident when I was a child. I was run over with a motor car. So as I grew up, my left-hand side's always off. I was been a lot of pain with my left-hand side. And then I'd found out that it was sending pain down to my nerves, down my body. So everything just got too much. So I decided to pull on the site. And I ended up on here. And I'm still here today. Yeah, when I travelled around, I was always on my own with the children. So, being on here is quiet, so as long as it's quiet, I'm happy.
With lifestyle now compared to years ago is a lot different. Travellers used to stop more on the roadsides, down lanes, or if they had field work to do, they would stop on the farmer's land. They would. But as with health problems and that, there's always been in the travelling community, Gypsy and travelling community. There's a lot of mental issues as well, a lot of depression, and it's from years ago there was a high rate of suicide. There was, like men and women. There is support now. You have to phone up. It's like different charities. There's one that's popular. It's at York, where you like my own case. I'm talking to a grief counsellor over the phone. They phone me once a week, to have a chat, because with me just losing my mother, and that's helped. It has from what it used to be. It was like pull yourself together, stiff up a lip, and get on with the job. But it isn't. With health issues, a lot of travellers has been failed. A lot have been failed with their health issues. They have. But first of all, like some cases, when you talk to them, it's like they said, "Oh, it's like we've been forgotten." Some people they're more educated now. Well, some are, but it's like something's been said. It's gone on from generation to generation. It's with pressures, like being prejudiced and like myths. Like I've told you before, and when they say, "Oh, Gypsies is going to take your children." Well, me no harm. They've got their own kids to look after. They don't want no more. Yes, and yes, it's silly things like that. I say I know there's good and bad in every community. I said, but some people does things and then point the finger that way.
Thank you. So I hope you all enjoyed that short film. Very proud of the tenants there. Thought they did really well. And so just moving on, we're going to look at health. And so Gypsy and travellers have a life expectancy of 50 years old, shockingly, in comparison to 81 years old for the general population. And another study has stated that the general population will live in up to 50% longer than Gypsy and travellers. So, and they're twice as likely to have health problems than the rest of the population. So, like long-term illnesses, they're suffering from disabilities and so on. So GP access, so they're less likely to be registered, less likely to attend if they are registered, and they don't always disclose their ethnicity. Other health issues such as high infant mortality rates, high maternal mortality rates, low child immunisation levels, mental health issues and substance misuse issues. Missed prevention opportunities, so moving around, they don't get the opportunity to go for the screening that's available for most people, and a deep-rooted fear of what they call the C word, or that bad disease. So yeah, I mean, very deep-rooted fear of cancer. Next slide, please. So they have genetic illnesses, coronary illnesses, pulmonary illnesses, disability, arthritis. Come across that on a daily basis. There's cultural, psychological and environmental factors as well that can make it harder to adopt healthy habits. For example, overeating is encouraged through the way that they cater for a large extended family, and chubbiness being seen as a sign of a healthy child. They trust family members more than they trust health professionals, which is never a good thing. Face discrimination when they're accessing gyms, and major impact on life expectancy are early deaths due to road traffic accidents and suicide. Next slide, please. Dental health. So there's strong evidence that Gypsy and travellers have huge oral and dental health problems resulting in hospital intervention, and it's a key factor in identifying safeguarding issues. So on one occasion, a toddler were being fed Coca-Cola and ambrosia custard through a bottle, which obviously resulted in obesity problems as well as the dental problems that caused. And there's evidence of inequality of dental health and dental services use within more disadvantaged travellers. So those that are unauthorised and on transit sites are less likely to access those services than those that are on sort of council sites or private sites. Can I have the next slide, please? Mental health. So Gypsy and travellers traditionally do not access mainstream healthcare services. The stigma around mental health, it's apparent, and particularly within the males. Almost all applicants for sites declare themselves bad with my nerves at the stage of application, and this from an early age, so late teens. They're already suffering from anxiety, depression and bad with their nerves. Many of our tenants have suffered loss of a spouse or a child, and quite a number through suicide or car accidents, leading to issues with depression and no access to bereavement services, although that is improving, as you heard Sinette say there on the video. They have a lack of stimulating company, monotonous days of cleaning and only having contact with peers who are also depressed, and so it's kind of one of those knock-on effects. They have no aspirations and no social interaction other than with the peers on the site. And they're unable to access self-help websites due to literacy or internet issues, so they can't always use the self-help websites that are available. Next slide, please. So they may be in an unhappy or unhealthy marriage, uncertainty about how long they can stay where they are until they're being moved on, so waiting for that knock on door to be served a notice to move. A huge responsibility is for the breadwinner because they're not accessing benefits, so you know it's the living day to day basically and what the breadwinner brings home, and it can be genetic as well. Next screen, please. Suicide, so it's 7 times higher than the settled community. So it's mostly males, and I think it's mostly males that succeed in committing suicide due to the violent way that they choose often to do that. So such as hanging, shooting, train tracks, So they do it in such a violent way and in a way that there's no sort of going back. So, and I think it's genetic as well. So members of families have committed suicide, then the other members of family are more likely to do so. And the youngest person I've experienced committing suicide is 12 years old. The oldest 54, but with an average age of 19 to 30 years old. Some people have lost more than one member through suicide, so it could be two sons, husband and daughter, etc., etc. And grandparents, so as they get older, they've lost more through generations, so they could have lost 3, 4 family members through suicide, which is quite shocking. The next slide, please.
Can I just ask, Nikki, is there also a large self-harming community, you know, you're prevalent with together with suicide?
That's not really known because they won't seek help for that. They would hide it.
Right.
So that would kind of sit more in with the domestic violence and self-violence, I guess. So it's something that would be hidden.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really to say that obviously the Nyscp has done a lot of work towards self-harm and suicidal ideation, and we do have the self-harm and suicidal ideation pathway now as well, so it's all about getting support for people. So, you know, that's available on our website. We'll share the link together with the presentation.
Right, thank you. So can we have the next slide? Thank you. So yeah, domestic violence. So it's a male-dominated culture. It's accepted as normal for many women and not actually recognised as abuse. You know, they're married for life, basically. So divorce is rarely accepted within the community. And brings shame, which means they're forced to leave the community entirely. So they often need to be estranged from the cast out by their own family, you know, and obviously the partner's family and so on. And so they end up entirely on their own and usually miles and miles and miles away from everybody that they know. Historical lack of awareness of services available. Although there've been more awareness and more disclosures recently. And again, the links to suicide and, like you just said, probably self-harm. It's just that they won't disclose self-harm, they won't disclose domestic violence. So it's something that really needs to be worked on, you know, in encouraging them to disclose these issues to us. The next slide, please. That's just a list of services that we aim to work with and do work with them, not always successfully, but we do keep trying. And the next slide. I've just put some useful links on there for any kind of reading that you want to do, or if you want to look any further into, do some further reading on Gypsy and Travellers, then there's a couple of useful links on there for you to look at. And the next slide. So, I'm conscious of time, so I apologise that I've run so long, but are there any questions? And thank you for listening.
We haven't got any questions in the chat, but obviously if there are any questions, you know, please, you know, put them forward. In the absence of questions, and bearing in mind that we have got limited time, I just wanted to make everybody aware about we have some upcoming masterclasses coming on. There's the one for Be Aware, the launch of the new Be Aware hub or the improvements to it, and also about the professional development programme. And we've also then in July got our quickfire safeguarding updates as well. There's more coming after the August holidays then. Don't forget, it's also Safeguarding Week on Monday the 20th to Friday the 24th. And the partnerships and the boards are hosting a series of different sessions. More information is available on the link, and you can book online using the Eventbrite link that's available there. And there are all the key links to the website. So the partnership website for safeguardedchildren.co.uk, our contact us page, our normal website. You can follow us on Twitter, don't forget to follow us on there. You can join our Facebook group. You can access all of our videos through our YouTube channel. We also have Instagram, and we've also done have a podcast as well. Latest one was in relation to sudden unexpected deaths in infancy, which is a really interesting podcast, and obviously very tragic for families where that happens. And don't forget to subscribe to our monthly email as well. Really, there's been a lot of people saying thank you in the comments. Really interesting presentation. On behalf of the partnership, Nikki, I'd just really like to thank you for the presentation that you've done today. It's been really informative, and we hope you'll come back and talk to us some more about this sort of thing at another time. But in the meantime, thank you everybody for coming along. If you've got any queries, you can always email us, and we'll see you next month for another masterclass.